We're talking today with Vietnam veteran Roger Faber. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Roger, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
Okay, I was born in Grand Rapids in Butterworth Hospital, November 5, 1945. And
Now, did your family actually live in Grand Rapids, or were you outside of it?
no, my family lived on Black Hills in the city limits on the southwest side. And I had a good upbringing. I had parents who loved me. They didn't have a whole lot, but they took care of us. We had shoes and clothes. We might have patches in the jeans and so on. But we were given a strong work ethic. It was very important, and also a high respect for authority, whether it was the teacher in school or the policeman or the next door neighbor. They were in charge, not us. And I was 11 years younger than my next sibling. They had a family, a sister and two brothers, and then I came way behind. Okay. So I was kind of like the second family.
Right, you were a baby.
I had very nurturing parents, and I'm thankful for that. I wish I had thanked them when I had the chance yet, but
what were they doing for a living?
Oh, my dad was a truck driver and delivered coal back then. This was, in the 50s. And my mother was stay at home, didn't have a driver's license. But one of my fondest memories is when I came home from school, she sat down with a cup of coffee and I had a glass of milk and some cookies. And we talked about my day. And then she said, go change your clothes and go out and play. We didn't have television. And so we played in the neighborhood. Okay. It was a good family, and as were the rest of the neighbors. Very diverse, even somewhat racially integrated back then. Black Hills wasn't a racial thing. It was because of the black walnut trees, but it's on the southwest side, kind of behind the Keeler Brass buildings on Godfrey. So that's where I grew up.
Okay. Now, did you finish high school?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I went to Christian school all the way from kindergarten through. I went to Southwest Christian through 9th grade at the time, and then to Grand Rapids Christian High for 3 years. I graduated from there in January of 1964. They had half-year classes, and you went from one grade to the next in January. And so I got into that. I started out in September, but when I was 8 years old, I broke my leg pretty bad, and I missed so much school that I had to go back a half a year. Because I missed about a half a year, I took that, and that's how I got in that January class, so to speak.
All right. And now, what did you do after you graduated?
My brother had a painting business with Lang and Faber decorators, and I started working for him when I was 16, and I could drive and get to work. And so during high school, breaks and summertime, I painted for him. I did that after high school. I graduated in January '64, and I worked full-time for him until March of '65 when I went to Ferris.
Okay. And then you went to, so at that point it was at Ferris State College?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. And what were you studying there?
Architecture. They had a program for architectural draftsmen. And I had mechanical drafting in high school, which I really enjoyed, but I didn't want to draw threads on a bolt. I thought, and I always had a fascination. When I was way back in middle school, I would buy magazines of house plans and study those and think, I can do that. I can do better. And so I had interest in that. And I knew I enjoyed painting. I still do. But I knew that I couldn't do that for 50 years. My body wouldn't take it. So I thought I better do something different. So I made a decision. Ferris had that program, so I thought I'll apply to there, and if I get in, I'll try that. If I don't, I will apply to the State Police Academy. Well, I got in Ferris and went through it was an 18 months continuous program. And went through that, and I got out of there in fine shape. Got a job in Madison, Wisconsin. Now this was 66. I got done in August, I guess, of '66. We were engaged for a year and met my wife of course, 3 years before that, but we dated, and then we got married in September of '66. I had this job in Madison, Wisconsin, but at that time the draft was really cooking in '66. And getting back to my upbringing, we had this strong respect for authority, so I was ingrained with the thought that don't volunteer for the Army, but if you're drafted, you have to go. Okay, so that was my mindset. And evidently the schools at that time, I had a student deferment while I was in school, and I can remember getting another deferment in the summer of '66. But I thought, well, I'm all set for another year, because that's what they usually were worth. Well, evidently the school had to notify your draft board that you're no longer in school. So somewhere along that winter of '66, '67, I got a notice for a physical, supposed to show up in Grand Rapids go to Detroit. Well, I was living in Madison, so they arranged for me to take a bus to Milwaukee and have a physical, which I did. That went well. It wasn't a problem. I didn't expect it would be, although one interesting story there, in Madison, when we got on the bus, the one fella had a prosthesis, a wooden leg, thinking, man, a living, he should get deferred right here at the bus station. But he had to go, and then when we got to Milwaukee, they made him take his leg off before he got weighed. And then they told him to go sit down. But that was just kind of humorous that this is the way it goes. But so I went through that and went back to work, and yeah, in a few months I got a notice for a draft that I had to go to in May to Grand Rapids bus station, and I would get inducted.
Right. Okay. To back up a little bit, when you went for the physical, did you notice anybody trying to scam the system, or were aware of anything like that?
Well, there was talk about it. You know, guys would eat soap or something I don't know if any of that stuff worked. I suppose people tried to do things to flunk the physical. I did not. I can have this mentality. You go, if you're physically fit, you're going to go. So there wasn't anything wrong, I guess.
Yeah. But you didn't really notice anybody doing anything like that?
No,
okay.
I didn't.
Okay. Now, was the physical itself reasonably serious, or was it, aside from the wooden leg thing, pretty cursory?
Well, I don't remember it being serious. We were all young, so we were healthy generally. I think they were looking for things that would indicate that somebody was trying to get out of it somehow, whether they played like they were deaf, or because there would be a hearing test and an eye test, I suppose, and blood pressure. It wasn't, it wasn't difficult, but I suppose they were looking for certain things, and people that kept complaining, they probably, they weren't dumb. They could pick the guys out.
Okay. Now, Madison's also a college town.
Yeah.
At the time you actually went in, I mean, did you notice any kind of anti-war stuff going on, or were you aware of any of that?
I don't think so. Not then yet. I think that came probably more in '67. I don't remember. It's a college town, and it's a rather liberal town in their thinking, progressive, maybe. But I can't recall any demonstrations. There maybe had been some, but I just ignored it.
Yeah, and you weren't in school yourself anyway, so you had other things to do. Okay. And how much did you know about Vietnam at that point?
Nothing. Probably couldn't find it on a map. Other than being in the news, you knew the word, but I didn't know anything about the politics of it. I can't recall. I learned most of that later.
Right. Okay. So we get now, so it's May of '67, then you have to go and report now and be sent off for basic training.
Yeah.
Okay. Where do you go for basic training?
Actually inducted at Fort Wayne in Detroit. In that center, and that was kind of chemical because we were supposed to have another physical. Well, that physical was interesting. They said, have you been to see a doctor since your last physical? No, I hadn't. So you passed. That was a physical.
Right.
And I have this recollection that the Marines would pick out people they wanted on some days and not other days. Well, the day I was going through, they weren't picking anybody else. So I ended up being sworn into the Army.
Mm-hmm.
Got my service number, US 54967-085, something you never forget.
Mm-hmm.
And they told us to memorize that on the train. No, we took a bus from Detroit to Fort Polk, or to Fort Knox, Kentucky,
Mm-hmm.
near Louisville. And I remember that was the weekend of the Kentucky Derby, because there was all kinds of activity and hype and so on. But so I went to Fort Knox for basic training.
Okay. What kind of reception do you get at Fort Knox?
Well, you just, you get a haircut and you throw all this clothes at you in your box and put your civilian clothes in and they got shipped home. We were just, there were a lot of guys who were in the National Guard. And I don't know, there's a story about that too. Oh, you want to hear that?
Yeah.
When I was working in Madison, Wisconsin as an architectural draftsman for Flad & Associates, our spec writer was a major, we called him Sarge, but he was a major in the National Guard, and he could arrange to get us into the National Guard.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I opted not to do that. And that was a conscious decision that my wife Judy and I made.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got to Fort Knox for basic training, there were a lot of the guys in my company who were National Guard people there for basic training. So
Right.
it was the same for everybody. The drill sergeants, I don't remember any physical abuse at all. Again, I was in pretty good physical shape. I can do what they asked me to do. They get kind of pushy, and ask you to do silly things, but hey, that's part of the thing, part of basic training, I guess.
All right. I mean, had you kind of we were expecting to be shouted at and
Oh yeah,
that kind of thing?
My older brother of the two brothers had been in the Army during the Korean War,
Mm-hmm.
and so he probably clued me in a little bit, not too much, but
Okay. Now, did the instructors treat the guardsmen any differently from everybody else?
not generally, but one guy did. He was also an attorney, and so he got some preferential treatment. Supposedly he had hemorrhoids and he couldn't march and this and that, so he kind of got put off to the side. They didn't treat us differently other than that, maybe. I do remember one other time when we were just on a Saturday. We were all put in formation. We had a march over to some building and we gave blood. This was not optional. It was just you did that. One fella was Jewish, and he objected to giving blood on the Sabbath. So he was excused but had to go back in on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things that happen in life, that you just kind of don't forget.
Okay.
They accommodated him.
All right. So what did the actual basic training consist of? What were they making you do every day?
Mostly PT, a lot of PT. That's what you remember the most. They told you when to get up, they told you when to shave, you didn't have to think a whole lot. Everything was planned for you. You did a lot of running. Just obviously PT, they got us in shape. I don't think basic training was terribly vigorous. Obviously, they told you how to march, how to make turns, and when to about face and present arms and order arms and all that kind of stuff. How to salute properly, about revelry and about military courtesy, general orders on behavior. Classroom works like on first aid. We had these sticks with like a pillow on each end, and we had to beat each other with it. Kind of silly, but I guess there was a reason for that too.
Okay. All right. Now, did they give you, how did they figure out what to do with you coming out of basic training?
Oh, that was interesting. During basic training, well, I guess when we got there, a day or two, we took written tests. And I tried hard on the test to do my best. And I thought, because that's a good thing to do. You do your best. And, you know, maybe I'll go to the Army Corps of Engineers with my background.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried hard. And during basic training, they would call different guys out and talk to us about, you qualified to go be a radio repairman or a medic, or I don't know, it's just a whole series of things. Warrant officers, we're specialized officers in a particular field. But of course they were looking for chopper pilots. So I knew that was not a good idea. And I kept saying no, because I probably even said, look, I'm here for 2 years and I'm going to go home. So you got 2 years, not 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then one time they called out just 2 of us and said, you scored pretty well on the test, and we can arrange to have your congressman, who at that time was Jerry Ford for Grand Rapids or Kent County, we can arrange to have your congressman get an appointment to West Point for you. Oh, and how long is that? Well, you'll be there for 4 years and then 5-year commitment following. No, like I've said before, 2 years. Then I'm done. And so my opinion of what happened is, in my chart or my file, it was written down as non-compliant. This guy just says no to everything. I mean, he does what he's told, but he's not going to sign up. And so at the end of basic training, day or 2 before the end, we got orders, and my orders were for Fort Polk for 11 Bravo, 11B. I don't know what that is. So I go to the orderly room and say, what's this? Oh, the guy says, that's small arms infantry. Whoa. So I, of course, wrote home or called home, says, this is where I'm going, Fort Polk, small arms infantry. Well, my wife's grandma, who had for years written back and forth to Jerry Ford, just communicating and so on and so forth. So she writes Jerry Ford and says she didn't think her grandson should be in the infantry. And he probably checked in the order he knew. And anyway, she got a letter back. I wish I had the letter. He wrote back and said, you're right, your grandson probably shouldn't have to be in the infantry, but if a person is drafted, the Army can assign them to any job they qualify for. Now, your grandson qualified for a lot of things, but one of them is the infantry. So that's how I got that. And I attribute it to the fact that I was so stubborn. Later, OCS was another thing they offered, and pilot, all this stuff. Well, OCS, Officers Candidate School, I was told or believed at the time that you could sign up for OCS, go to that school, and then while you're waiting for your class to start, you could say, I think I changed my mind. And that then you could probably fall between the cracks, and they would say, well, Faber, what can you do? I'm an architectural draftsman. Well, why don't you go see this Army Corps of Engineers building? Well, I didn't know that at the time, or didn't think that at the time, so I said no to OCS along with everything else. So,
well, I have interviewed somebody who tried that particular tech and eventually wound up in the infantry anyway.
Oh,
he actually went through most of it before he wound up there. But yeah, so they were kind of onto that one.
Oh, shucks. Well, they probably should have been. So but I think the reason I kept saying no was that they figured this guy, we got a job for him, and we'll give it to him. So,
yeah,
right or wrong, that's what happened.
Well, they certainly needed foot soldiers.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was the biggest need they had.
Yeah. Okay. So now, what was Fort Polk like?
Oh boy, it was hotter, because now I went in May, so that basic is 2 months. So June, July, middle of July, I get on a train for Fort Polk. I think we ended up in New Orleans or something, because there was this Dixieland band there at the train station, and then a bus to Fort Polk. And this is middle of July, it's hot, and they were remodeling the barracks, so we lived in tents, or slept in tents. That was okay. The sides were rolled up, and you're so tired, you sleep. And first time I ever saw an armadillo on the bus ride into Fort Polk. Didn't even know what the thing was first. And of course they told us about snakes that you had to watch out for. And at that time at Fort Polk, they had a special area called Tiger Ridge. And that's where we had AIT, or Advanced Infantry Training, on this Tiger Ridge. And it was intense. It wasn't undoable, but it was intense. The PT got more intense, the training got more intense. My two worst days, I think, in basic and AIT were pulling KP. To me, this made no sense. Get up at 4 o'clock and just at the mercy of some mess sergeant who, this was his time to shine, you know. He could tell us what to do, and miserable days. I didn't like the other days, but they weren't as bad as KP, and for me.
All right. Now, were they consciously gearing your training for Vietnam?
Oh yes, clearly. They talked about it all the time. And most of the drill sergeants and I think they talked about it. They were vets from Vietnam. They had been there. And so that was all the time. It's clearly, we're training you to go to Vietnam. No question about it. It just oozed from them that this is where you guys are going. Although during that summer of '67 occurred the war in Israel. And so then there was this big thing, well, maybe you guys are going to go to Israel. You know, they got this war, but it was 7 days, I think. It was a 7-day war.
6-day war, yeah.
And of course, so that died down, and back to Vietnam you guys are going. It was physically more strenuous, and I suppose mentally too. They were trying to toughen you up both ways. We had lessons on how to react in an ambush. I don't think it ever worked that way, but we were told and trained that if you get ambushed, you don't hit the ground, you turn in the direction of fire, and you charge it. Well, we didn't do that in reality, but that was a training, and I suppose there would be an element of surprise if all these GIs did that, but it worked okay when everybody's firing blanks, but in the real world, they weren't blanks anymore, so things were a little different. You had to know more about where this was coming from than just say, well, I think it's coming over there, that's the way I'm going.
Right.
No, it didn't work that way. But it was, I think they treated us a little bit better, but again, I had this, my attitude was a bit of an issue. I did what I was asked to do, but one time we would run from one class or range to another one. Again, I understand why. But always we would have to wait before the next class would start for the stragglers. One day, I don't know what was in me, but I decided that, hey, they're going to wait, I'm going to walk. So I walked from one to the other. Of course, I took quite a bit of abuse from drill sergeants because this was not normal for me. But I said, look, they're going to wait for me to get there. I know it. We're going to wait. Probably didn't help either.
Yeah.
But, you know, I had gotten to a point where I just felt, I'm tired of this. Run back and forth. You know, come on, give us something make it more meaningful.
Okay. Now, were you a little older than most of the guys you were training with?
Yeah, I guess so. I was 21, but yeah, I was older than those that were enlisted out of high school or something. So I was a little bit older, and I was married, and I had been to college, and I had a career that I wanted to pursue. I had my faith, and I didn't want to be, I chafed at the idea of being treated in such a way.
Yeah, because part of it is sort of programming people, and when you're younger, they're easier to program.
Yes, but I will say that the Army is very good at training people to do what they want them to do. There's no question about that, because they did it to me, and they did it to all of us. And for most of us, it was effective down the line. for some, and nobody knows how they will react in a firefight until you're in one. And sometimes guys just froze. It couldn't function. And you don't know that. Training doesn't do that. Yeah, it was intense. I got to say too, when I went in service, when I got drafted, I weighed 150 pounds. When I got out of AIT, I weighed 175, and that was not fat. You know, I was just muscle and shape.
Okay.
So they did that. On the other hand, when I came back from Vietnam, I weighed 150 pounds again.
Right. Now, while you were in basic and then in AIT, did you ever get to go off the base?
I did once in basic training. We were allowed 1 3-day pass, and at that time, my brother Warren, who had been in Korea, and his wife Verna, brought my wife Judy down, and I had this weekend pass, and we stayed in Louisville, so I got off. In AIT, I don't remember anything I don't remember getting off base, whether it was offered or if I had been offered, I'd have done it. But I think I was on the base. I never left this Tiger Ridge, as they called it.
Okay. All right. So is AIT another 8 weeks?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what happens at the end of that?
Get a 30-day leave. You get orders. And my orders were to report to Fort Lewis, Washington on a specific day in October. And I finished up in September, from middle of July, middle of August, middle of September. Got a 30-day leave before you go overseas. And so, first time I'd ever been on a plane. I took a plane from Fort Polk to the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. I want to call it Love Airport, maybe, whatever it is. And from there, I took a flight from there to Chicago. Never been on a plane before, so that was a new experience.
Okay.
Turns out I'd be on a plane a lot.
Yeah.
And my wife met me in O'Hare Field. I kid you not. I was walking through the airport. I had to buy a ticket to get to Grand Rapids. And my wife and I met right at a corner in O'Hare Airport. It was incredible. She had flown down to meet me. So that was really, really, really nice. So I had a 30-day leave, and that was good. As you can imagine, we could spend time with family and...
Yeah, but you know you're going to Vietnam.
Oh, yeah, that's in the back of your mind. But also, there's this faint hope, something will go different at Fort Lewis. You know, you always got, I had this illusion that something will turn out, something will work out, and but should have known better. But it was a nice 30-day leave. Everybody got that before they went overseas, and all I had to do is get from Grand Rapids into Fort Lewis.
Okay.
Yeah, and you got paid when you left Fort Polk. Travel mileage from Fort Polk to Fort Lewis, whatever that mileage was. I don't remember the rate, but so you use that money to buy tickets.
Right. Okay. So now you go out to Fort Lewis. How long do you stay there?
Just a few days, and I remember this was October, and it was drizzling all the time. Now, you really didn't want to be outside, but of course you had to go to the mess hall, and I suppose there was some paperwork and things they had to check. And of course, there were constantly, Fort Lewis is right adjacent to McCord Air Force Base, which was convenient. You know, we processed at Fort Lewis, and I can just think it was a few days.
Okay.
And then I, of course, was told or given paper we're going to get on a bus someday at a certain time and haul you over to McCord Air Force Base.
Okay. All right. Now, when you fly to Vietnam, were you on a commercial plane or military?
Yeah, this was commercial, chartered.
Yep.
And they packed them in as much as they could. I want to say they were 737s, but I know they had a center aisle that was just this wide and 3 seats on each side of the aisle, and pack it in. We got food in a box or something to eat, which is okay. And it's a long flight. I can remember coming home better as far as time goes, but it's about 24 hours.
Okay.
We stopped in Hawaii, and we stopped on Wake Island and Guam to refuel, I guess. You didn't get off the plane, you just stayed on. Nobody wanted us around. In case we run away, I guess.
Wow. All right. So where do you land in Vietnam?
Cam Ranh Bay.
Okay.
And that I wrote in my journal too. I can remember we're approaching Vietnam, and it's dark, it's nighttime, and I think, wait, you're going to Vietnam. How you do this in the dark? You know, they'll probably give me a gun and say, show up in a year and we'll take you home. Literally, I was afraid. And as we come closer and closer, there's lights on all over, and I'm thinking, this is terrible. I wasn't prepared for that. And of course, we landed, and there's buses and the lights on, and herd you on the next bus and bring you to a barracks. And you can find a bunk, and we'll wake you up in the morning to eat breakfast. I woke up and I went outside. There were guys water skiing on the bay, and I thought, boy, this isn't bad. This is pretty nice. And little did I know, that was only my first stop, you know. But it was only there a couple of days too, in the in-processing center. They moved right on through this. They had the skids were greased, man. They knew this operation.
Okay. Now, did you have orders to go to a specific unit, or did you only get those after you got to Vietnam?
Got to Cam Ranh Bay, and then you got orders to go, in my case, to the 1st Cav. I don't know if it included Bravo Company at that time, but it was to the 1st Cav in An Khê.
Okay. All right. And how do they get you there?
By plane.
Was this now a military transport?
Oh yeah, now we're on military plane, like a C-131, I think. I'm pretty sure, or 123, but anyway, we flew from Cam Ranh Bay up to Da Nang, as I learned later, what Da Nang was all about, which was further north. And we no processing there, but then we got on probably a Caribou, which was a smaller plane, and from there we went to An Khê from Da Nang.
Okay. Now, what part of South Vietnam was An Khê in?
I would say the Central Highlands, as I recall. It's about halfway, approximately. And the Army base there was Radcliffe, Camp Radcliffe. But we always called it An Khê. There was a little tiny village just outside of Radcliffe, Camp Radcliffe. We just called the whole business An Khê.
Right. Now, the base itself was pretty good size, though, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a good size. I have a hard time judging it, but it was a good, in all wooden barracks. There was a hospital there, or infirmary, motor pool, fuel depot. I didn't see much of that, you know. Again, when you get to the airstrip, get on another bus or some vehicle and brought us over to, in my case, to the, I guess to the first battalion or brigade, I don't know.
You've got, a division breaks down into brigades, and the brigades are made up of battalions.
Right.
And battalions have companies in them. And you were in a Bravo company, so B company, that would be 1st Battalion normally.
5th Cav.
Yeah, 5th Cavalry Regiment.
Which would have been like a brigade, you know, 5th Brigade, 1st Cav Division. So I was in Bravo Company, or B. Again, there's some orientation that you do. They're treating you much better, you know.
Okay. What kind of orientation do you get?
Well, I can remember clearly sitting on some bleachers watching a combat air assault, which was the Cav just did constantly. We did that 2 or 3 times a day. They would bring in some artillery rounds and then some gunships firing rockets down, and then choppers with Hueys with guys on that you'd jump out and create a perimeter around this landing zone that you were hitting. And we witnessed one of those just so we knew what that was all about. We got our first chopper ride, and I remember thinking, God, there's no doors on this thing. You sit on the floor with your feet on the skids, and a pack and a rifle and all this gear, And by George, I don't want them to turn so that my side is down because I'll just slide right out. It doesn't happen because the centrifugal force you're just stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that again, the first time there's a little anxiety, but still I thought, hey, people do this all the time. I get no worse off than the rest of them. If I fall out, I won't be the first one.
Mm-hmm.
But so we had our first chopper ride. We just kind of buzzed around, and so that was good.
Yeah.
I got to tell you something that happened there, though. We were in a barracks, and this guy comes up from the field, and he was soon to go home within a few days. So he was out processing as we were in processing. We're all in the same building. And he comes in the building carrying a helmet that he had, and that helmet had a gunshot that went in kind of from the back and came out the front. It was a good size hole, not an M16 or even an M60, but maybe an M50 round. And he had that thing on when that got shot. And he said, but the only injury he had was a piece of the steel pot that was embedded in his neck. But he was given permission to take that helmet home. Mm-hmm. He showed us the round went through there, went through the steel pot and the helmet liner, and he had some letters. We always tucked our letters inside the helmet liner in between the web and the fiberglass, keep them dry. And because everything was wet, so tuck your letters in there that you wanted to write home about. And it even sliced through that upper level of that letter in his helmet. Boy, that was an eye-opener. But they had given him permission to take that thing home with him because that was quite the souvenir. But it didn't get him to go home. It just, it was his time to go home. He had been there a year.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Of course, that didn't do much for my confidence about
Yeah. When you were in the orientation, did they try to teach you anything about Vietnam or the Vietnamese people and how to deal with them? Or just stay away from the women?
Well, yeah, I guess. I think some of that went way back to AIT because there's a lot of transmitted diseases, and you're still representing your country here, and you know how to behave. But yeah, there was lessons like that probably way back in AIT and probably reinforced again there, although I don't remember the specifics of that.
All right. And then once you finish that orientation, now do they send you to your unit?
Yes. I don't remember. We must have been choppered out, but now you're getting fewer and fewer. Now there's probably only 2 of us that were going to go out to Bravo. Maybe I was the only one. But at any rate, choppered out. Don't know where I'm going, of course. Turns out they were guarding bridges in what they called the Bong Song Valley. And there was a river. It had bridges on it, and the Army did that. They would did this several times. They would take you out of the field and give you some light duty, which was kind of nice. You got to sleep in a bunker and get a little more rest, and you didn't walk all day through the jungle. So it was a break. But at that time, Bravo Company was guarding bridges, so I ended up dropped off by the end of this bridge. And I don't know, somebody probably met me. They knew I was coming. And they knew what squad and I was going to be, what platoon and what squad. I don't remember if I was in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd platoon, but I remember the squad, it was 3 of us. A squad was just 3. And the other 2 guys were stationed at this bridge, but they were up on a hill near the bridge at a bunker, at kind of an outpost, and they were spending their day out there and maybe their night. But anyway, somebody walked with me up there and introduced me to these 2 guys. I don't remember their names. One of them was really a small guy, wiry and hardened. And the other guy was a little bit bigger. And but they introduced me, and we probably sat around there for a few minutes talking about where you're from and what's your name and this and that. And then they said, but why don't you just stay down at the bridge while we're here? you know, meet some of those guys, because we don't really need you up here anyway. That's great, okay. So back down by the bridge, and there's this little bunker built above ground right at the end of the bridge. It's a fairly wide river, and there was also people guarding on the other end of the bridge. Maybe that was a different platoon. So we killed time during the day. You didn't have much to do. At night, and of course the chopper would bring out food. That was all good. Chopper would come out in the morning with breakfast, ammunition if you needed it. You just help yourself. And sea rations to eat at noon. And then hot meal again at night, more ammunition and mail. At night, I had to take my turn walking halfway across the bridge and back. And a guy from the other side would walk his halfway across the bridge and back. And we were supposed to drop hand grenades over the edge from time to time. Don't know why, except that maybe we just let the Vietnamese know we were still awake and we were there. And so we decided the thing to do is, if you drop, just pull the pin, let the lever fly, you got 4 seconds, in theory, or in design. If you did that real quick, that hand grenade would fall in the water, and the mud and water would fly up all over the place. If you flipped it out too soon, let go of it too late, it would go off before it got to the water and then just powder the bottom of the bridge, which was just wood with gaps between, with shrapnel. So we decided the best thing to do is to wait a couple seconds after you let the lever go and try to, in just a game, see if you can get it to explode just as it hit the water. Kind of dumb thing to do, but you got to do something. And you do that for an hour and a half, whatever you're supposed to, and you wake up the next guy, and then he'd take his turn. We did that. Another thing that happened when we were there is a chaplain came out. Didn't see the chaplain very often, but once in a while the chaplain would come out to the field. And I remember that time because it was the first time. And he, I don't know if he was Protestant or Catholic. It doesn't matter. He was Christian. And because the Catholic fellows would go up and have confession, walk up. And those of us Protestants, we just sat there. And so that was okay. I remember he couldn't wait to get back on the chopper and take off. And we were in a fairly secure place, and we didn't take any gunfire. There was no problem the few days we were there. But then that ended, and then we go back out in the boonies. Okay.
Now, during the day, were you checking the traffic as it went back and forth?
No.
Just let the Vietnamese come and go?
I mean, unless you saw something that was very unusual, if there's some guy carrying a gun. But there were always what we call Harvins. They would be on the buses or motorcycles and never knew what they were doing. Didn't really pay much attention to them. You didn't, gotta admit, I didn't trust them a whole lot. I don't think any of us did.
Yeah, so that's the Arvins, that's the South Vietnamese Army.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. What impression by now do you have of the Vietnamese themselves? You're watching them on the bridge and that kind of thing for a few days. Does anything register with you yet?
The language kind of irritated me. No, it was not their fault, but I didn't know what they're saying. And there's always this, what are you talking about, you know? Because they didn't know what we were talking about either. But yeah, that has stuck with me for many, many years. I finally gotten over that. Probably 20, 25 years ago, I was in the McDonald's and there was a Vietnamese family and they were talking Vietnamese, and it kind of made the hair stand up on the back of my neck, just the remembrance. So that struck me. I don't know if it was when I was at the bridge, but another thing is we thought they chewed betel nut, and it was like a gum or a narcotic. I don't know what it was, but their teeth would turn black, and so they often looked like they didn't have teeth. And that struck me. And of course their clothes, they often, the women in these black clothes, pants and everything black, and these hats, and you kind of get used to that real quick. They would try, I don't remember, it was not there specifically, but they were always, typically if you were interacting at all, they were trying to sell you stuff, because they wanted money. Can't blame them.
Okay. Now, when you're on bridge duty, I mean, were you getting solicited by people at all, or
No,
they
I don't
just were
remember
going
that.
by? Okay.
I don't remember
All right.
that.
So, how long did you stay at the bridge?
Oh, just I think if I had gotten there when the platoon had gotten there, or the company,
Mm-hmm.
it might have been a week, but I was probably there 3 or 4 days.
Okay. All right. So, what comes next?
Okay, but out in the field, and that was my first experience of a real combat air assault.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that, and then when you hit the ground, then the lieutenant of the company would say, okay, we have to go so many clicks or kilometers in a certain direction, and he'd point out something on the horizon that we're heading towards.
Mm-hmm.
And these were always what the Army called search and destroy. And we believed that there was some intelligence that said that there was some activity in this area. Maybe you were told you're going to run across a village, maybe not. So yeah, you did that, and you got to where you're supposed to go, and then the next thing you know, well, they're saying we got to make a little clearing for choppers. They're going to, we'll bring us someplace else, and you do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that would happen 2 or 3 times during the day. Of course, again, the routine was in the morning, everything kind of works together. How a company operated with 3 rifle platoons and a mortar platoon. Mm-hmm. And the mortar, you were always together, but at night, the mortar platoon, you'd set up this LZ, a small camp, and the mortar platoon would be in the center, and 1 rifle platoon would build a perimeter around it, dig a little foxhole wide enough for 3 of you. You always worked in 3. These 2 guys I met, the 3 of us were always together, and other groups of 3. Well, if you're going to stay with a mortar platoon, which was rotated between the 3 rifle platoons, 1 night with them, 2 nights on ambush, dig this little foxhole, but 3 of you could sit at the edge and get your feet in there and pile the dirt out in front, build a hooch behind it so you got to sleep under the ponchos, and somebody had to be awake at each spot all the time, so you rotated, everything got rotated again, 1.5 hours awake. Make up the next guy, he was up for 1.5 hours, and the third guy 1.5 hours, or an hour, whatever you agreed. And then in the morning, every morning, the two platoons that were on ambush would come back in, and then food choppers would show up with breakfast, ammunition. And I was told it was unique to the Cav. You had this Mad Men where all the rifle platoons would fire 1 clip of ammo through their rifle, kind of clean it out. We never cleaned them. We just squirt mosquito repellent in the chamber and run 18 rounds through it to clean the thing out for the dirt and water. And so you got ammo. If you needed it, you helped yourself. Hot breakfast. So I don't eat pancakes to this day. Pieces of pancake, and some eggs, instant eggs. But you ate because you're hungry. And then they also threw out these boxes of sea rations, a carton, several cartons, enough for everybody to have a sea ration. You opened up the top, flipped it upside down on the ground, the whole carton, because the names of the meals were printed on the top. And you pull the carton off, and so now you got probably a dozen boxes on the ground, but you don't know which one. So everybody would pick up a box. And whatever that box was, that was your lunch. Except that nobody liked ham. Well, most people didn't like ham and lima beans. Mm-hmm. And one that I don't think anybody ate was ham and eggs chopped. But there was spaghetti, and there was pork steak and scalloped potatoes. That was pretty good. Spaghetti was good. I don't know, but I can remember the 2 bad ones. Mm-hmm. We had a Sergeant Bacon, was the first sergeant in our company, a big black man. He loved ham and lima beans, So whoever got ham and lima beans, go find Sergeant Bacon and trade whatever he had for your ham and lima beans. So you can at least get rid of that. If you had ham and eggs chopped, just leave it. Take the little cup of applesauce or peaches with a little can of fruit. Take the sundry pack, which had like hot chocolate mix in it and toilet paper, salt and pepper and sugar, and maybe some toothpaste, a can opener. So that was every morning. And then away you go again, more combat air assaults. Same, just day after day. This was just, oh man. I didn't say it was meaningless. It was boring most of the time, except when you made contact, and then just in an instant, everything changed. You have a rush of adrenaline, and everything's changed. But most of the time, it could be days, nothing happens, except you just.
Okay. Now, what was ambush duty like?
Ambush? That was always interesting. Again, when the company ended for the day, wherever that might be, you set up this camp for the night, mortar platoon, one platoon of rifle platoon around it. So 2 nights you had to go on ambush, and well, you'd eat supper, get mail, ammunition, supper, mail. And that was always nice. And then go out on ambush, and whoever was pulling point, you didn't know where you were going to go, but the point man, and I was one, the 3 of us pulled point for our platoon. So again, we rotate everything. You'd pull point for a day, and you would have 2 days that you didn't. You'd be the second and third guy. So the point guy that day would go out, and if you found a little stream, maybe you'd seen it earlier in the day, or some other feature, and you think, well, there could be a spot for an ambush, but you tried to get there just at dusk. And if it wasn't quite dark enough, you'd just walk past it, make a big loop, and come back at dusk. And then everybody laid down, the 3 of you again. And about 5 yards over, the Army said meters, 5 meters over, another group of 3, and 3 and 3. Well, the end groups of 3, you had a claymore mine, and you walked the claymore mine out. I think it was like, 150 feet or something. I don't know what that wire was. You put the firing cap in the claymore mine. The claymore mine was probably about that long, that high, that thick, plastic, all in case. You'd slip the firing pin in it and walk the wire back to the trigger at your position. That's what the 2 end groups did, so that if you heard something coming through, you could fire this claymore mine. But you didn't fire the claymore mine until right away. You wanted whoever was coming to get in your line of fire. But if more was happening, you could always fire this claymore mine. So you did that. Now you did not build a hooch. You were just laying down in the grass, the wet. If it was raining, you were in the rain and whatever. It was dark by now. And again, 3 of you, somebody had to be awake, and you'd just reach over and wake up the next guy. And with no foxhole, everything was quiet. And you spent the night then.
Okay. Now, what kind of terrain were you in? Were you in the Highlands or in lowlands?
Yeah,
closer
we
to
were,
the coast?
at that point, we were in the Highlands, which is quite I don't know if jungle is the right word. We went through thick stuff. Even if we were on a trail that the Vietnamese had built or cut, they were real short. And we were all, this one guy, I can't remember their names, but the 3 of us, one guy was a little bit shorter, but I'm 6 foot tall. I had to stoop over to get through here. There were times when you actually, if you were pulling point, you carried your weapon on semi-automatic. Everybody else behind there was supposed to be on safe, and you could flip it to automatic. We never fired these M16s on fully automatic. First of all, the recoil you couldn't control where you're shooting enough. So the point man is on semi-automatic, everybody else is supposed to be unsafe. Just because you're going through thick brush sometimes and trigger could get jerked, accident. But so what was I going to say? There was something. Oh, the point man, if you were walking on after combat air assault and you got your instructions on where you're going, that was the point man's, nobody told them how to get there. Mm-hmm. You picked your own way. And everybody followed. Nobody complained. You know, if he picked a bad route and had to chop through some jungle with a machete, so be it. He did it. He's got to make the way for us. There were rice paddies around, and we'd often end up walking through rice. I felt sorry for the Vietnamese. They would be screaming at us. Of course, we didn't know what they were saying, but you knew they weren't happy. And I don't know that it bothered us a lot. I felt bad for them, but hey, I got a job to do. I got to get through here. That wasn't nice. I no wonder they hated us. You know, we'd hear you guys trying to raise rice for his family. He didn't want a car in the driveway. He didn't want a television in his hooch. He wanted rice. The rice paddies were dirty water. They had terraced them a little bit so the water would run through a little gutter in the dike into the next one, and so the water gradually found its way.
Would you walk on the dikes, or would you slog through?
Sometimes we walked right through the water.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes on the dike, but that was probably not the safest. The safest place was in the rice paddy. Mm-hmm. We didn't worry about landmines in the rice paddy. We worried about little tripwires on the dike. So mm-hmm. you probably take the paddy over a tripwire.
Okay.
But when you got, the next time you got a break, you didn't take a break in a rice paddy, but you got into some higher land, and you're going to, okay, we're going to take a break. Whether it was for lunch or whatever the reason, you take your boots off, because almost always you would have leech on your legs, your ankles, and up your calf a little ways. Couldn't pull them off. They were, probably 3/8 of an inch wide, as I recall, and maybe an inch or inch and a half long, gray, dark gray, and they would be attached. And there's two ways to get them off. Either you use a cigarette lighter and heat them up and they would drop off, or you take mosquito repellent and squirt them and they would drop off. But you always did that. Your feet were always wet. Socks, just boots. Was wet and dirty.
Yeah. Now, when you were going overland, would you use trails when they were available, or did you stay off of them?
Yeah. That was up to the point man. Mm-hmm. His judgment on what this looked like. The problem with walking on a trail is that's the best place to get in an ambush. Mm-hmm. Because they knew Americans tended to be a little lazy, and they wanted to find the easiest way to get to wherever they wanted to get. And but again, it was the point man. Mm-hmm. I don't remember leading us on a trail, maybe for a short distance, but you were always on high alert. Actually, the best place to be in this whole company, which as I recall, we were about 80 strong. Mm-hmm. I think we were understaffed, but 80 was about what we ever had. And you're all walking with about 5 yards between you. Safest place to be, except for tripwires, was at the front end or the back end. Because if you're going to get in an ambush, they're going to take the middle mm-hmm. group. So in some sense, pulling point was not a bad thing, except you had to be extra alert, okay. Probably.
Now, how long were you in that Highlands area?
For my entire time in the field, I was in the Highlands area. A couple of experiences that I had then. One time it was my turn to pull point, and I don't remember, I might be combining 2 times because just for the sake of time now. It was my turn to pull point that day, and I had a bad feeling about it. But you can't say, well, I don't want to do this. You're here, Faber, do your job. So you don't complain. But I was nervous about it. It didn't feel good. And we were on on a little trail, or well, it was wide enough to have a vehicle on, but we're kind of, I was getting instructions from the lieutenant on where we had to go, how far, and I prayed that this was going to be okay today. And it was a grassy area, and what we called elephant grass. It was tall grass, but probably on me, up at my chest, elephant grass we called it, it was tall. And I'm heading through here, so I wasn't too worried about an ambush because there was no place for anybody else to hide. And we was quite a ways away from this little road or trail that we had left, and I could see that there was a bald spot in the grass. So I thought, well, that could be a hole in the ground or something. I don't know, what's kind of curious. So I kind of angle over there, and I got closer, and I thought, God, it looks like a truck tire. What in the world is a truck tire doing out here in this field? Take a few more steps, and it was a python, just rolled up, digesting his meal, I guess. And so I said to the guy behind me, there's a big snake here. So I'm not going to kick the snake, so I walked and kept going. But I would turn around periodically, and some guys would walk up and take a picture, and some guys would be walking way over here, you know. It was kind of humorous. Everything went good, but when I prayed, I did have this calmness that, Raj, it's okay, whatever, you're fine, you're okay. So that was good. Now, I don't know if those two were the same day. You know, this is 50 years ago, literally. And but it was boring most of the time. Most of the time, I felt sorry for the Vietnamese. We'd come across these little villages, and they're just scared to death of us. You could tell that. They would cower, and I think that they tried to not be friendly, but didn't want to do anything to upset us. So they didn't hardly dare move. And I'm sure that when the VC or NVA would come along, they would behave similarly. They would be friend. Of course, they could speak the language. We knew nothing. We didn't have an interpreter in the field with us. We didn't have any. I think S3 is intelligence. That was all back at An Khê. So, but if we took a prisoner, we'd get him on a chopper or a casualty, a Vietnamese casualty, get him on a chopper, and they'd fly back to An Khê and take care of whatever happened back there. We would do first aid on, I mean, if they had been wounded, but we didn't.
Okay. So you arrived basically, what, in October of '67 or November? Okay. And
October I got there.
Yeah, all right. And then how long do you spend actually with the...
In the field like that? What we call, well, again, I want to touch on a few other incidents when we would get a break from this field business. And one time we went back to An Khê, and we were on QRF, or Quick Reaction Force. And then we were allowed to have a couple of guys maybe go to the PX, but most of us had to be there at that barracks, that if something happened, we could jump on choppers and respond. So we got a call. We had to get on these deuce-and-a-half trucks because there was a traffic problem between An Khê and Pleiku, a traffic issue. We got out there, and the issue was a python was on the road and just on the shoulder, and these little guys on these motor scooters didn't want to go around, and the buses were jammed up. And so what are you going to do? What are we going to do? So we shot it. I mean, we shot it and shot it. We don't mess with a snake. Well, then they get a call, the radio man gets a call that the captain, the adjutant, wanted this snake. Oh, you gotta be kidding. We gotta get this snake up on the deuce-and-a-half. What a job. But we did it. I was then back at An Khê at some point, and talked to this adjutant. He was from Wyoming, city of Wyoming, so we had a little bit in common. Our Captain Hobecky was his name. And I said, what about that snake? Whatever happened to that snake? He said, I'll show you. He rolled it out. It was 22 feet long. At the widest part, it had to be 18 inches wide, all dried, and this was his souvenir. His souvenir. He had anything he could do with it, except he had it skinned.
Yeah.
But you know, funny, and also, if you went to the PX when we were on QRF, picked up a few things. Well, I don't know what we bought. That doesn't matter. Get to the checkout line, and of course, these people that were stationed at An Khê, they'd get out of line because we smelled bad, we looked bad, we acted bad. We had a rifle and ammunition on us. They got out of line and let us go. Pretty cool.
Well, I had been asking about time frame, actually just for time frame. We're not necessarily done with the field time yet,
Okay.
but you're getting there because at the end of January the Tet Offensive starts, and both before and after that the division does move. But so basically, though, how long were you working out of An Khê before you went anywhere else?
Okay. Well, first I got called out of the field in December.
Okay.
And that happened. Well, I got to go back. I mentioned Sergeant Bacon. First sergeant, good guy. After a new guy had been in the company for a week or 10 days, at lunchtime he'd come and sit by you and just say, "Hey, let's talk." And so he wanted to know, where you were from, what'd you do before were you drafted, did you enlist? Just wanted to get to know you. Nice thing to do. Makes you feel a little more part of the unit. And so, I don't know, I told him what my past a little bit and didn't think much of it. Well, we got called out of the field and we were now guarding bridges between An Khê and Pleiku. Again, this, maybe a week, less than a week, but a few days of rest. And so we were guarding this little bridge, and the truck from An Khê would come out in the morning and drop off food and ammunition, go up to the next bridge and the next bridge, and finally come back, pick up the chow containers. And one morning they said, "Faber, get your gear together. You got to go back to An Khê." And I'm thinking maybe one of my parents died or something. I got to go. Maybe I got to go home. Something bad happened. So the truck left. I ate, got all my stuff together. Truck came back. It stopped. I threw my stuff on the truck. Get on a truck with these guys. We get back to An Khê, and they said, "You got to report to the orderly room." Okay. So I went in there, and the first sergeant, Sergeant Lewis, said to me, "You got a journalism degree?" "No, I don't." I think, "Oh, shucks, man, I'm back out in the field. When's that truck leaving?" He says, "Can you type?" I says, "Oh, yeah, I can type." And I had typing in high school. We didn't have computers, but I could type. All 10 fingers. Not real fast, but I could type. And my nature is to do it right. Do it slow enough, but do it right. So he said, "Okay, you can be S1 clerk." So that's how that happened. I ended up taking the guy's place, and he was going to go back home, and so that's how that happened. And then I thought, that all stems from that conversation with Sergeant Bacon. He put in a word that when they had a job like that, "I got this guy Faber, I want you to talk to him." I really think so.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he was a casualty and never got to talk to him again, never got to thank him. I don't remember if he was killed or if he was wounded, but I never saw him.
Okay.
And that happened about a week before Christmas of '67.
Okay. Now back to the time in the field, you talk about being out on ambush duty and this kind of thing, and in these camps at night. Did you ever have contact? Did the enemy attack you, or did you spring an ambush?
Not in ambush in the dark.
Okay.
That brings up another memory. When we loaded our magazines, or clips as we called them, with more rounds, we put in 2 regular rounds and a tracer, 2 regular and a tracer. In a tracer, of course, you could see this orange glow. And you could see that in the daytime, but at night, you could really showed up. Didn't have an ambush activity. That was really pretty rare because the Vietnamese wanted to keep their head down too. So we would get ambushed during the day.
Okay.
But they knew where they were, and they knew where to run. We never did. So we didn't set up an ambush during the day. If we made contact, it's because we walked into something,
Right.
or we were walking towards a village and we got some gunfire from a village. But
Nope.
not at night.
Okay. So when you had contact and you're out on patrol and so forth, would it be just a couple of shots and quick, or a more organized thing?
It was more than just a sniper. There was, and that varied, but once in a while it'd just be a sniper, but it was more organized than that. They had a little plan. It was almost like a mini, if it was by a village, they had a purpose. And there again, I don't know why we did this, but we would often burn a lot of things in that village. And I thought, no wonder these people hate us. Why are we doing this? This is not a way to make friends. You burn their hooch down. For what? Just because you think there's some ammo in there? Won't talk too much about that. I'll talk about one time. I wasn't pulling point. I was third guy that day. So I probably pulled point the day before, but we were going up an incline, and all of a sudden the point man started shooting rounds off. Well, the two of us behind us, one went a little to the left, I went a little bit to the right, and we kept going up carefully. And there was a bunker, and he saw he's telling us what happened. He saw a rifle sticking out of the bunker, and it was in the ground bunker with a cover on it. And then the guy, he could even see the guy behind the rifle, so he shot. There again, we were told that our orders were not to fire unless we were fired at. Well, who come up with this idea? You know, you can't do that. Why? Nobody. I mean, come on. You sent me over here, but don't tell me when I can shoot. So anyway, he shot the guy, and he probably slid down into the bunker a little bit, but then another guy came out and ran around, and I saw this. He started running around, and all three of us shot. Didn't see a weapon, didn't care. We knew we were in bad shape here. And that guy got hit in the knee or in the leg, but put him down. And that was, I think the point man threw a concussion grenade down in the bunker, and that'll get anybody else out of there. And by that time, the rest of the company is coming, the platoon is coming up, building a big perimeter, and the medic is there, and the lieutenant and the first sergeant wanting to know what happened. You know, he got a report, or at least a verbal report, or maybe he filled out a paper, an incident report. So the guy that was pulling point was telling them, and I'm sitting there too, and the medic is working on this, wrapping this guy's knee up. Machine gunner off to the side, his machine gun, he was going to shoot, that's right, he was going to shoot some rounds down in this bunker, and his machine gun, M60, jammed. So he goes out on the perimeter and he monkeys with it, gets it unjammed, and all of a sudden this burst of M60 rounds. Yeah, we all were startled by that, but this poor Vietnamese died, and he had a wound in his leg. He didn't die of the wound. I think he died of fear. But you can understand, here's all these big Americans talking a foreign language. You got some guy messing with your leg, you don't know what he's doing to it. Anyway, not good. Not good.
Okay. And how common was it to actually have a firefight during that period when you were in the field? How often would those happen?
Well, sometimes we might go a week without, and other times it would be once or twice a week. They sent us, you know, they must have had information, but we made contact when the Vietnamese wanted us to.
Right.
You know, when they thought they could cause more trouble than we could, they would cause the contact because they knew how to get away. We didn't. We didn't.
Yeah. I mean, were you aware of any effort to do things like count bodies or count enemy casualties after these events?
Well, we reported what we saw, and that was, and the word was you count killed and wounded, but for every KIA, the Army assumed 2 WIAs.
Mm-hmm.
In the documentary and in the books, I read about it later. I don't watch movies about Vietnam, never. Well, I watched Forrest Gump, but that was humorous too. But otherwise, I don't watch any of these Good Morning America or anything. But later, I found out these numbers were padded. Just terribly. And the documentary, it was incredible. It was gross. Some said, somebody along the chain of command said, "This isn't believable." We don't care. We don't care. Somebody will believe it. Well, yeah, we did. I'm sure that the lieutenant, the company commander, actually, it was always the lieutenant. I think company commander was supposed to be a captain.
Normally, sometimes the first lieutenant would do that, but you have a lieutenant being your platoon leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we didn't have any captains out there. We just didn't. They didn't have enough, evidently. Right. So maybe a first lieutenant, but whoever company commander was, filled out some report, whether it was probably by radio. I mean, what we had to do with a piece of paper out there in the mud, you know? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But probably by radio. Said, "We made contact, this is what we see." Right. And somebody in the back at An Khê was making up the numbers.
Are there other things you want to put in the story about time in the field before we kind of switch over to your headquarters?
I was just thinking about that. And my birthday is November 5. I got moved to Vietnam in October, so shortly in the field. My birthday comes along. My wife is so diligent about sending letters, and I to her, and I got a lot of mail, more than most. On November 5, on my birthday, she would send a package about every 2 weeks. I get a package on my birthday with a birthday cake in it, a little bit misshaped because it gets banged around, but we got to go on ambush. And she sent this cake and a can of frosting just to put on it, but we got to go on ambush. So gather around, guys, because we got to eat this cake in a hurry. So smears this frosting on this cake with the bayonet, and she had sent some forks, and we whacked this thing up and gobbled it down. But it came on my birthday.
Wow.
Yeah, really something. And we went on ambush.
All right. And kind of get in December now, you're coming back, and now you've got a job basically a headquarters clerk at this point now.
Yeah, in the orderly room. And the orderly room, Sergeant Lewis was the first sergeant. They had a clerk for each company, and then the adjutant, which was Captain Hobecky, and then myself, S1 clerk. I was now in headquarters company, and I was S1 clerk for the battalion.
Now, what does S1 clerk mean?
Okay, S1, I didn't know when I got the job. I didn't dare ask the first sergeant. He said, "Go see so-and-so." So I did. And I said, "Hey, I guess I'm your replacement." He says, "I'm leaving in a week." I said, "Okay. What is S1? He says, "Personnel records." So, what's that? I mean, what's that all about? He says, "Well, I put in orders for promotion, for different awards. I order forms that I use. I got to order some of them here locally at An Khê, the division headquarters, and some of them I have to send back to Washington, depending on it's a DD form or Department of Army form. I don't remember which I had to send where. But, and another thing he had to do, or I had to do, is sympathy letters to next of kin for anybody killed in the battalion. The sympathy letter, you had to, there were some things that you always had to say. It had to be typed and without errors. Boy, that's hard. In a manual typewriter, but at least I'm in a building now. But it was hard typing these things perfectly. My wife here to type will be lots better, but I'm doing my best. And if you make a mistake, you just start over. No copy machine, carbon paper, and you'd try to write like massive shrapnel wounds or gunshot wound. And quite often I would get a letter back. I didn't sign it, but the adjutant signed it on behalf of the battalion. We'd get a letter back saying that the people would like to know more detail about the wounds and the accident, because usually people were not allowed to have open casket. You know, we didn't have refrigeration, obviously. And I had written something like massive shrapnel wounds. Well, what are you going to say if a guy got hit by a rocket? You know, we got pieces. It was hard. I know that I can understand as a grandparent now that you want to know. And I didn't always know where. I mean, they wanted to know at what intersection or at what stream or at what bridge. I didn't know. And I didn't make stuff up, but it was hard to respond. That was almost as harder than writing the initial letter, because you tried to respond and still you weren't able to be. And there's just some things I couldn't write. But that was a big part of the job. Also, when we took casualties, my job was to go down to after we left An Khê, when we got up to Utah Beach and specifically at LZ Jane, I still had the same job, but now it's not a building anymore, it's a tent. But part of my job was at LZ Jane, when they took casualties in the battalion, I had to go to the first aid station and take notes of the diagnosis and prognosis that the doctor saw and jot some things down. That could be a little bit helpful if the man died later. And that was just part of the job too. Not nice.
Okay.
Not nice.
All right. Now, on the base itself at An Khê, I mean, how long did you stay there before you moved?
Okay. I don't know if it says in my journal. I don't think I know exactly when we moved. We moved from one place on An Khê to another building and cramped us down, but we still had a desk in the building, and we slept in the back part of that building on cots. At some point, I might have a record of when our battalion moved from An Khê to Utah Beach, just some beach on the Gulf of Tonkin, north of Da Nang. Well, not as far north as Way, but in that direction. And that was kind of nice. First experience with, can you want to hear about this now? At Utah Beach. I'm still doing the same job, only now our bunkers are above ground because it's all sand, so they built sandbag bunkers with the cover. Pretty nice. And I thought, you know, I surely don't get to shower and bathe as often as I want, and I'll get out of this water. I grabbed a bar of soap and I'm going to go take a bath. I found out that soap doesn't work in salt water. It just turns like a piece of rubber. That didn't work. So now I get out of the water and I'm covered with salt. This is almost worse than dirt. But I learned. You know, I'm from West Michigan, a big lake. That's nice. I could take a bath in Lake Michigan. It'd work out great, but not there, not in the salt water. But I learned. We weren't there very long, but Sergeant Lewis he knew what was going to happen, and somehow he found a way to get orders to rotate out of Vietnam, go back to Germany where his wife lived. He was still in the Army, but he was married to this German gal, and he was an E7. So, I mean, we never saw him again. And the next thing we knew, we're going to LZ Jane, which is about straight west of what was Utah Beach. Things didn't get better.
Okay. Now, was this all before the Tet Offensive began?
No. Tet was way back at An Khê.
Okay, you were still in An Khê when Tet starts.
I was in An Khê at Tet Offensive.
Okay, so talk about that. When that happens, does anything affect your unit directly, or?
It did a little bit. Our typical Army. An Khê it was a big base, and it had a ring road, and along the ring road were these guard towers. and they barbed wire and lights and all this. But I had to go up, all of us did, take turns, going up, not all the way to the perimeter, but somewhat back from the perimeter in some makeshift shelter. And we were supposed to be on alert that if something breached that perimeter, we would be ready. That affected it, yeah. But not, we had some murdering at night, either early, let's say 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, or at 9, 10 o'clock at night. But again, it was a big base, and I think they were really going after the fuel depot, and that was not near where I was. So it wasn't a problem.
Okay. So the start of the Tet Offensive doesn't affect you particularly. It happens.
Yeah.
Were you getting news? Were you aware of stuff going on, or were you just?
Oh yeah, we knew how serious it was because we had units that were up near Way, and they were taking casualties. So we knew what was going on, and we heard. We were quite a ways north. Saigon, we didn't know what was going on in Saigon. That was the least of our worries. Man, we didn't really care. Well, we got our own problems. We don't care about Westmoreland, man. I don't worry about him. He'll take care of himself. We'll take care of ourselves. Leave us alone. We'll be okay. So we were quite far north, and but An Khê, we did not have a major attack at Camp Radcliffe. Yeah, murdering.
Yep.
A lot of people think, oh, that's terrible. Well, that's not so bad.
Okay. All right. And the division was in the process of moving north in part to provide more support for Quezon and other things that were also going on in that period.
North.
But the division is in the process of moving when the Tet Offensive begins at the end of January. And after that, your battalion then makes that move up.
To Utah Beach.
Utah Beach, and now then you go to LZ Jane.
Yeah.
And is that where you spent now an extended period of time?
Yes, yes. I think maybe in my journal I've tried to nail down dates, and I can't recall them now. But I spent a long time at LZ Jane. It was not a real big. It was our brigade.
Okay.
And so our battalion headquarters were there, but the other battalions were also on this LZ. There was a large artillery brigade, or whatever they call them. There was a large gun right by us, an 8-inch diameter job, to keep water in there, sloshing around to get this thing anchored in the mud and jump off the ground. Yeah, noisy. When he fired at night, the whole roof of our bunker would go like that, just from the concussion. And sometimes you'd hear a short round. And oh boy, hope it makes it. My job was pretty much the same, getting more difficult because now I had this little field desk that collapses in a tent, holes all through this tent, just full of mortar or shrapnel holes, and had this old Gestetner that I had to crank out paperwork on. Poor old typewriter with chips in it from shrapnel and Gestetner.
What's a Gestetner?
What? Oh my! A Gestetner is this thing that you don't remember these things that cranked, and it had black ink on a drum, and you had a stencil that you had to cut, and you laid that stencil on the drum, and there was ink in this thing, and you could
generate multiple copies.
Yes, sort of and that's what we did orders on. And so that was my job. I had the Gestetner, and if a company clerk needed something done, I did it on a stencil. I was the only one that was cutting stencils on my typewriter. But the old Gestetner, I don't know what happened, but it wouldn't feed ink. And so I had to take a tube of ink, put it on some toilet paper, and rub it on the drum, and then lay the stencil on it and kind of press that in so that the ink could start coming up through the cuts on the stencil, and crank it out and hope you had enough ink to get enough copies that you needed. Hi, this is making a lot of work, you know. No, but you had a good time. You know, I showed you the picture of the guy cutting hair there, and we, one time we had a steak fry. Somebody, I don't know who, but we all chipped in, and he went to a Utah Beach area, again on the Jeep, and bought from the Seabees, the Navy guys unloading ships, this was black market, but he bought a crate of steaks, brought them back. Just thinking of buying. When I was in the field, it was, just to show you if the Vietnamese knew where we were, all of a sudden there'd be a Coke girl show up on the dike or something. And she'd have this satchel bag with pop and beer in it, but pop mostly. Paid $1 for a can of Coke or Pepsi or whatever. It was warm, but it was wet. So we bought it. We bought it with MPC, Military Payment Certificate, because that's what the Army used to try to keep U.S. money out of, and they'd switch the series of MPC periodically, and then all the old series was worthless, and the poor Vietnamese got stuck with, they really wanted regular currency, U.S. currency, but I didn't have any, because you just got paid in MPC, and that's what you had. But it was curious, we bought it from the Vietnamese gals, called them Coke girls. Yeah, at LZ Jane, life was just, I could sleep in that bunker, you know, and then I'll tell you about that storm, for the record here. You saw the pictures, but lived in a bunker that was room for 2 cots, and it may be about 3 feet additional in length, so it's probably 10 feet long, and a cot, and I had a piece of plywood on the floor, and then the other cot. I lived there mostly by myself, and one night I woke up, and of course this bunker is built on kind of a hill, and I could hear water running, and what in the world? Water running? Oh, the water's almost to the bottom of the cot. And so I got to get out of here. Well, what was happening is water running down the side of this hill got between a couple sandbags, and just like a faucet running, just pouring in the bunker. So I got to get out of this bunker, pick my rifle in on the floor, an ammo bag, pick those things up, slip my boots on, they're in the water, climb out of the bunker, but by this time I'm deciding I'm going to go to the chapel tent because they had a wooden floor in there, and at least I can get out of this mud. And dark, but I know where the tent is. Get in there, and of course I can hear guys talking. The cooks are in there making coffee in these big kettles. They just put water and coffee grounds right in there and let it boil, and but it's pretty good, especially when you're cold and wet. So I spent the night there, I don't know, we're just talking. And next day is just everything is mud, and I got to try and get this typewriter going again, and I get sitting there, and I get my desk in mud, and hey, life is getting bad. And I don't, well, I got to get a few things out of that bunker yet too. I had some shirts that I had sent to the little village outside of LZ Jane to get laundered, and they had been all nicely folded. They're laying on the floor down there, so I go down to get it, and the water is up to my groin, right as you get down in the hole. Phew! So I can't live in there. I build a hooch on top of the bunker. 3 ponchos. I got, I don't know where I found these tent poles, but hey, everybody man for himself. So I didn't tear anybody else's hooch down, but I found some tent poles and some ponchos. So build a hooch, even with one end. I had a litter. I don't know where I found the litter. With an air mattress, I put that on there, and that's where I slept. But by this time, I'm only about 6 weeks from going home. So I thought, I'll never get back in that bunker. And by this time, they're starting to to prepare another base camp called Camp Evans, as I recall. And I never got there, but so that's the time frame. So it must have been in September, late September, we had this storm. And I make a place to live on top, at least sleep. And I can remember guys saying, Faber, if I was as short as you are, I would not sleep on that bunker. I said, if you were here as long as I've been here, and if we get mortared, I guarantee you, I hear that mortar leave the tube. I can be in the bunker before the mortar hits the ground. I guarantee it. Because you're so in tune. I knew when we were getting mortared before the mortars hit. Because you get the whoosh, whoosh. And so I knew what that was. And I'm sure that it didn't happen. Then I got a replacement. I think his last name was Lee. Nice guy. I don't know where he was like I was. Someday hauled him out of the field to take my job, and when I was going to go back. And another interesting thing, I took a leave and went to Okinawa for a week. I had been to R&R. I had gone to Hawaii and met my wife for a week, and that was in June. Where was I before I went there? Was I LZJ? Yeah, I was at LZJ then already in June. Because I had a hopscotch all the way back to Cameron Bay to go to Hawaii, and back from Hawaii, go back to Cameron Bay, and hopscotch. You just stand in, go to an airstrip and say, where am I going to go? And give me a plane or let me know where the plane's going, I'll get on. That's how you traveled. Finally, a chopper. I got to get back to LZJ from Da Nang or something. Okay, this chopper's going there. Anyway. So the last couple of weeks, getting really short. And I decide, for some reason, I can't believe I did this. I'll go to Okinawa for a week. And the company clerk, we had been, I don't remember names of these guys, but he says, I won't even take you off the morning report. So as far as it's not going to record this as a leave. I just leave you on the morning report, but you come back. Don't worry, I said, I'm so short. I got to get back here to go home. And otherwise I can't go home without orders. So he knew that. So I hopscotched down to An Khê, totally illegal. Get to the airstrip at An Khê. There's 3 or 4 guys that we're all going to go. Now there's 3 or 4 of us from other areas. They're going to go to An Khê. I don't know if they were going legally or not. But we get from An Khê down to Cameron Bay, and we fly on a C-131, what they called weight available, because they were flying jet engines and other equipment on that needed to be repaired to Okinawa. So we get to Okinawa and spend a week. It was okay. It wasn't Vietnam, so it was good. Don't remember much of it.
Didn't you need orders to be able to get on these flights, or did you just walk up and?
No, okay. I just said I got to go to Okinawa. I didn't have orders. That was the idea. You know, I just was going, and I guess I looked like I know what I was doing, and I was. I'm looking like I was in the infantry, and I'm up from LZJ. I'm dirty. This guy is. You don't want to mess with him too much because he says he's going to Okinawa. We let him go. So I went to Okinawa. Stayed there for about a week, and so okay, time to go back to Vietnam. Go back to the airport or the airstrip there. I don't remember the Air Force base, I guess. Okay, I gotta go to Vietnam. I didn't have any orders. Well, you gotta wait till it's got room on a plane, weight-wise. It took a day or so. Now I'm starting to get nervous because I got to get back to Vietnam, get orders to leave. But I did. I finally, I ride on these C-131s. There's no sound insulation. It's just sheet metal, and boy, the noise. But you get off, for hours you can hardly hear anything. Get back to Vietnam. Here I am in Cam Ranh Bay again. I got a hopscotch. You got no orders. Just tell them I got to get here. Finally get back to LZJ, just a couple days before I get my orders to come home.
Okay. Now, during the time when you're up there up north, I mean, your division is involved in a lot of different actions. They're part of supporting the recapture of Hue and this kind of thing, and then eventually the division, or a large chunk of it, goes out to Khe Sanh and then eventually into the Aisha Valley after that. Now, do you stay on Jane the whole time?
I was.
And so the battalion still has its rear area there, and then they're going out, but you're staying on the base?
The brigade was operated a little like An Khê did originally, and they had these rifle companies, the Alpha Company, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, they're all out there. But we used choppers. You can't believe the chopper traffic. And that's how people came and went. And, chaplain go out on a chopper. It's just constantly choppers. But that was the last place I really was, at LZ Jane, and the brigade was there. I don't know about other brigades. I think they must have been in other places, but the 5th Brigade, or 5th Cav, was that level. The 5th Cav was there at LZ Jane, and then the battalions, along with the battalions and artillery unit. We must have been fairly close to the DMZ because, as I recall, these artillery guys said, yeah, they could fire into North Vietnam with that 8-inch gun.
Yeah, those were up actually. So you're actually at that point you're north of Hue. And between Hue and Quang Tri, basically.
Yeah. And Khe Sanh was a little bit north.
That's inland.
Inland, further west.
North and west. Yeah. But you weren't going out to those places.
No, because my job was S1. You know, I had I shouldn't say my hands full, but that was a full-time job. Between casualty letters and orders to go on R. And that was my job, assign guys to go on R&R and where they were going to go. And so in a way, they'd like to treat me kind of nice. But we had to teach the new guys. We had a lieutenant that showed up one day, just green. And he walked in there at 10. I'm sitting right near where the entrance is, and the other clerks are in there. I don't remember where Lieutenant Curl spent his time, the adjutant. This officer walks in, green as grass. I'm right by the door, and he says, "Soldier, I'm an officer. Why don't you call these guys to attention?" I says, "We don't do that here. We don't do it. And we don't salute anything lower than a major. This is just the way it is. This is Vietnam. Our attitude's, what you going to do? Send me to Vietnam? You know, this is different. This is not the real world. This is a different world." And they learned. These officers learned that you don't mess around with these enlisted guys, because they're kind of ornery. They didn't want to be here, and just leave them alone.
Okay. Now, did you have a commanding officer that you reported to most of the time while you were at the S1? Who were you
well,
working with?
Lieutenant Curl, by that time, Hobecky is long gone, Captain Hobecky, and now we got Lieutenant Curl, and he's the adjutant general, or adjutant, whatever, of our battalion. He was my supervisor, but he didn't bother me, you know. I guess he knew me attitude, and I had been doing this longer than he had, this adjutant paperwork. So that was okay. His biggest problem was he was one night sleeping in his bunker and a rat bit his toe, and he had to have rabies shots. Oh, not good. I didn't know rats would bite. I just thought, we had rats. And almost every morning when it was my rifle laying on the floor on that piece of plywood in the morning, I could see the rat tracks on the stock, the black plastic stock of an M16, rat tracks. And sometimes when I would be falling asleep, and I could hear them running around the top of the bunker on those sandbags. But I didn't worry about them. I thought, yeah, they're gonna hurt me. Okay. But once Lieutenant Curl got bit, I found out that if rats are rabid, they will bite, to unprovoked. Because he was sleeping. Dumb rat bit a big toe. So he had to have the shots.
All right. I'm going to ask some kind of standard sort of Vietnam stereotype questions.
Yeah.
One of the assumptions that people made is that there was a lot of drug use in Vietnam. Did you see any of that?
Oh yeah. Marijuana, I don't know anything about other drugs.
Okay.
But yeah, and even at LZ Jane, because if you walked around a little bit after, I didn't touch it ever.
Mm-hmm.
But if I walked around a little bit in the evening, you know, nice evening walk around, you could smell it coming out of some bunkers.
Mm-hmm.
It was around. I never touched it.
Okay.
Never have.
Did guys out in the field use it at all, or were they only use it in the
No,
camp?
not more than once. Just maybe once. We couldn't have it. In the field, you couldn't put up with it. And that's why they ended up back in the base camp, and they would be helping the cook. You know, they would run errands. They weren't going to go home,
Mm-hmm.
but they would get, we had outhouses at LZ Jane. We did at An Khê too. We didn't have flush toilets, so we had these outhouses, and the one close to our battalion, really close to the S1 tent, had 3 holes in it, and the back behind it that was low, that was below the seats, was open, and they would have cut off 55-gallon drums about this deep, and every day they would push a new one under there. And so some of these guys that couldn't hack it in the field, whether of being petrified or smoking marijuana, because we didn't put up with them in the field, send them back down and do something with them, they would have to pull these things out and burn that. I don't know if they use diesel fuel or kerosene, probably diesel fuel, and burn that and put a clean one or an empty one back in. That's the job they had.
Yeah.
But they were happy. Anyways.
Kind of work in the field. All right. And then another issue is one of race relations. Did you notice anything?
No. In fact, one of the company clerks, I think of Delta Company, I think that's what D was in Delta, was a nice guy, a black guy, very good worker, did his job. He was E5, nice guy. I wouldn't, the guys that just ended up cleaning out the johns, the outhouses, and the cooks, there was a mix of races. It wasn't a matter of what race you were to what you did. It was because you couldn't be in the infantry. You couldn't be in the field. And so, but it had nothing to do with race. It had nothing to do with promotions. If you had spent enough time in grade and did your job, you got promoted. It had nothing to do. I didn't even know what race some of these guys were by the time, you know, I had in-processed them when I talked to them about going on R&R, about so-and-so and such and such. I didn't remember what race they were when it came to promotion time, but I looked at how long they had been in their company clerk said these guys have been in long enough, and so I would put in for orders. I didn't care. I didn't think the Army did. The S3 officer at LZ Jane was a black major. Highest ranking guy in the battalion. But he was intelligence officer. Nice guy. Well, of course, he had the rank, but it wasn't that. He'd come in, sit down, and talk to us. You know, nice guy.
Okay. Now, you were there when Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Yes, and Bobby Kennedy.
But did the King assassination have any ripple effects, or you hear anything about that, or?
I know that we were aware of it. We had Stars and Stripes, of course. We knew of the. I'm sure I knew what things. Well, I learned from letters from home about Detroit and even in Grand Rapids. This was all going on, but I didn't worry about what was going on in Grand Rapids and Detroit. It was the least of my problems, and I think we were too busy trying to keep our fanny down to create any racial. There might have been racial issues if you get to Saigon, in, you know, where life was different. I know it was Vietnam, but we were in an area where we had to depend on each other. And I didn't care if he was black or Asian or whatever. If he was on my side, he was a good guy.
Yeah.
And I think they felt the same way about me. Of course, I grew up on Black Hills. We get back to that. And I played in the 50s, when Jackie Robinson broke into the big league, I was playing on an American Legion team, 13 and 14-year-olds, where 2 of us were white and the rest of the boys were black. At the same time, our coach was Mr. James. He was black. He invited 2 of us that had played in Little League that he felt were pretty good ball players to play on his American Legion team. We didn't call him Coach. We didn't call him Doyle James. He was Mr. James. Mr. James. I give my parents all the credit in the world. I had no idea that they said, fine, you play with Mr. James. We practiced on an old cinder field down on Rumsey and Godfrey. Terrible ball field, but it had a backstop. Hot. We'd practice and, let's pool our money and somebody can go up the hill to the little grocery store and buy a bottle of pop. Bring it back down, pull the cap off on part of the chain link fence, burr on there, and we shared it, passed it around. I didn't think of these ball players as black. I thought of them as friends that played ball. And I think they thought the same way about me. That's where I came from. So racial issue was not an issue for me in the Army. I treated them as my friends. We're in this together. And I think I never felt like they looked at me differently. I think it's because of the way I treated them. I think. It just never crossed my mind that we got racial issue here. I can't remember. I thought it was the other name of this sergeant, Delta Company clerk. Fuller? I don't remember. Something like that. We hung out together. You know, we were friends. Sure. Not close friends, but we did. This was our life, and we might as well share it.
Now, in a place like LZ Jane, a relatively small base, did you have any Vietnamese who would work on the base, or or ones living immediately outside? Or?
No, there was a little village outside, and like I said, I could get my shirts laundered and fatigues laundered. You never got your own back. You just sent in 2 shirts, and you'd get 2 shirts. They would, nothing personal about it. But they did laundry. That was done in that. I think that's what supported that village. I don't remember what we paid. I'm sure I paid something. But we didn't have any Vietnamese on LZ Jane. We did it at An Khê. We had them. They cleaned up, picked up trash. I don't know what they did. I had nothing really firsthand to do with them, but they were around. They weren't in the building, but they were out in the. I don't know what they did. I know they picked up trash.
Yeah. Now at An Khê, at least at some point while the Cav was there was also basically a house of prostitution in the village immediately outside.
Yep, that was part of An Khê. Like there was the main road from An Khê to Pleiku, and then there was a little side. They didn't call it a street, but that was this red light district that was there.
And then, was there anything like that near Jane, or was Jane too small?
Too small. The village there, I pretty much stayed on that base. I had no reason to go anywhere.
When you did the laundry, did you just swap at the gate or something like that, or through the wire, or would you go into the village to do that?
I didn't even do it. I just gave it probably to our supply guy, and he'd have a whole bag of shirts and fatigue pants, bring the whole business down, and probably came back with some clean clothes. And then if you gave him 2 shirts, you said, hey, I gave you 2 shirts. Okay, here's 2 clean ones. And I suppose we paid, but I never went into the village. I could have. I mean, we had Jeep sitting there. I could jump on Jeep and go, but why should I do that? This supply guy, that's his job.
Right. Okay. So are there other particular incidents or memories that stand out for you for the time in Vietnam that you haven't brought into the story yet?
Well, R&R, I talked briefly about it. That was wonderful. That was the Army did. My wife flew military standby from Los Angeles to Honolulu, so that was very inexpensive flight fare. She had to pay regular tours to Los Angeles, but it was a wonderful week. We were treated really nice. The community, that we got a packet of coupons. We got a discount for rent a car and a discount for various restaurants and entertainment things. We went to the comedian that just got in big trouble, Bill Cosby, a Bill Cosby show live there. Yeah, that was a high point, no question about it, of my
Yeah, sure.
And because I don't remember much about, I got pictures of Okinawa, but it was just to get out of Vietnam. And then I wanted to get out. And then trying to get back in wasn't quite as easy as, I mean, it was easy, except I had to wait a day for get a plane. Otherwise, it was easy. And nobody asked me questions. I just said, this is what I got to do.
Well, I suppose someone saying he has to go to Vietnam wasn't going to get a lot of argument.
No, but leaving too, I don't remember having any trouble. I just went to the airstrip in An Khê, because they were still flying out of An Khê in June, or no, in October, I guess. I somehow got to An Khê. I got to go to Cam Ranh Bay. Okay, this plane's going to An Khê. It wasn't an airport. It was an airstrip with a building. And he told the guy where he wanted to go. Okay, he didn't care.
Yeah, not his job. All right. So now, when do you get back to the States, and when does your tour end?
That was in October of '67, of course.
Well, 68 now. You went over in 67
yeah,
and came
in
back
68, October 68. That was interesting. Of course, then I had orders, so I didn't have to be so brazen because I always had paperwork. And processed, got down legally down to Cam Ranh Bay again to the out processing center with my paperwork. And they really had things organized there again. They had treated you nice, and okay, everything's in order. Maybe you got to. Oh, I got paid. They had been holding out a lot of money, and they paid me cash. So I had a pocket full of money, and orders. And you're assigned to such and such a flight. That's such and such a time. So be here. You can get on a bus and you go. It was on a Saturday. It was on a Saturday. We got off the ground at Cam Ranh Bay at 7:30 on a Saturday night. We got that plane left the ground, we clapped. Stood up, clapped. We're all packed in again, commercial flight, but 3 seats on each side of a tiny little aisle. They had flight attendants that gave us a box of food. We made us, but everybody was happy, nobody was complaining, but in cramped quarters. We stopped in Japan to refuel. Again, can't get off the plane. These guys can't trust them, I guess. And no, but I don't care. Fill up, get fuel in this thing, and we're ready to go again. No muss, no trouble. One stop in Japan. I think we were led to believe, and I thought we were going to have to stop in Alaska, but they didn't. They went directly to Fort Lewis, Washington. We landed in Fort Lewis, Washington, Saturday night. Of course, you got this dateline thing. And so same day twice.
Right.
Opposite going that way. So we land in McChord Air Force Base we left on Saturday night, 7:30. We landed there at 7 o'clock Saturday night, a half hour before we left. So I know it's 23 and a half hours. One stop for fuel, Japan. We're getting treated nicer and nicer. Still in this grubby old clothes, but bus us into Fort Lewis. Walk into a processing center. First thing they do is measure us for dress greens. Got to do more paperwork, of course. They got to tell us that we're still in the Army and how we're supposed to behave, and we got a 30-day leave, and my orders now are cut to go to Fort Polk. Oh yeah, that reminds me. Before you left Vietnam, a month or two beforehand, you could fill out a slip to say where you'd like to be stationed. Because I came back with more than 90 or 100 days, so I had to serve my time.
Yeah.
You could write down. So I put down Fort DeRussy, Hawaii, my first choice. I like that because I was in Hawaii. It was a nice place. Second choice, Fort Caution, Colorado. Never been there, but I thought it sounds like it'd probably be nice. And Fort Dix, New Jersey, because it's out east, and we probably get to see a little bit around Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia. That's cool. I like history. Get my orders, Fort Polk, Louisiana. I'm not going to complain. I know all about Fort Polk. But now my MOS, I'm an E5, been an E5 for more than, I wasn't in the Army a year and I had made E5. Make rank like crazy in Vietnam. And so I'm an E5, and I had my MOS changed from 11 Bravo to 71 Bravo. Because I thought, if this clerk's job doesn't work out, I don't want to go back out in the field if I can help it. So I changed my MOS. But secondary MOS is still 11 Bravo, but primary is 71 Bravo.
And
clerk.
what is, okay, clerk.
Clerk
Okay.
typist. So anyway, we're at Fort Lewis, Washington. They treat us really nice. Do this paperwork. Of course, I got orders. And then they give me some money to travel from Fort Lewis to Fort Polk. But I got a 30-day leave. I don't have to report for 30 days, so you're on your own. By that time, the dress screens are all ready, patches on them, nice and spruced up, new shoes, new hat, everything's really looking sharp. Now you can stay for a steak dinner. I don't want a steak dinner. I want to get out of here. I'm going home. I don't know how many guys stayed. We get out the door, and there's a whole line of taxi cabs. And the first guy pulls up a little bit. The first 5 guys out the door get in that one. The next 5 get out the next one. They all know you're going to go to the airport. Or maybe the guy said, we're going to the airport. Yep, that's where I want to go. So and then he probably said $5 a head or whatever. I don't know, but we all paid $5 or whatever the amount was. Brings us to Seattle-Tacoma Airport. And timing was perfect. I go in, I think, United, I know about, they fly into O'Hare pretty regularly. I went up to the O'Hare counter. The guy says, I want to go to Chicago. He says, okay, it'd be $94, military standby, but you got to run. All I got is this satchel. He says, gate such and such. Took my money, gave me a ticket. He says, go this way, turn this way, and it's gate such and such, and they're ready to leave, so you got to run. That's okay. Pick up my satchel, ticket, run. And made it. So we fly. I didn't have a chance to call home. They didn't know where I am. They don't know if I'm in Vietnam. They don't know if I'm dead or alive, literally. Because going to Okinawa, my wife got concerned. She didn't get mail. There was a chopper crash near Da Nang, and the guys were on their way home, so she's nervous. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't have time to call from Seattle, run to get the airplane, fly to Chicago, march up to the United counter, and by this time, it's probably 3 in the morning or so. Is that guessing? Want to go to Grand Rapids. Okay, the next flight is like 7 or 7:30 in the morning. That's okay. I can wait. How much? He says, $34. I said, $34? I want to go military standby. Isn't there room? He says, I can't tell you. Oh, Well, probably his room, but he's not going to say. I says, can I buy a regular ticket? Yeah, he says, I can sell you and not first class, but tourist.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Coach, $34. But now I can call, I get the ticket, call my wife's, she was living with her parents while I was overseas. I called that house, talked to my father-in-law, and says, I'm in Chicago, I got a ticket for Grand Rapids, I'll be there at such a time. My wife had, I didn't know, unbeknownst to me, she rented a mobile home from another, she was part of a overseas wives club, got to know these gals. All these guys in Vietnam, their wives got together once or twice a month for dinner and to chat. Well, some guy came back and he had to go down to Fort Hood, Texas, I guess, and his wife, they had this mobile home in Cutlerville, and my wife could rent it for a month because they were going to be gone. Okay, so she did. I didn't know about that. So I didn't know how to get a hold of her. Anyway, but I called her home, talked to my father-in-law, told him when I was going to be there. Everything's fine. He let my wife know, my parents know, my parents let my siblings know. And this was Sunday morning. I get on that plane, there's 5 of us. I could have wrung that ticket agent's neck, charging me, instead of $17, $34. Now 34 isn't much today, and it wasn't a whole lot then. I had a pocket full of money because I only collected $30 or $35 a month in Vietnam. The rest of it, they were banking for me. Heck, what a care. He knew there was plenty of room. The guy in Seattle charged me military standby without asking. I got a uniform on. Wants to go to Chicago. What a difference. Oh, man. I forget about it, you know. But it's something you don't forget. Like, yeah, he could have done better. He could have said, yeah, there's plenty of room here, $17. He didn't. So, got to the Grand Rapids, and everybody is there, of course, except my mother. And the story was, she wasn't feeling well, had a cold or something. I think it was just too much emotional stress for so long. She would see me Sunday morning, and she couldn't make it. And that, I can understand that, because she was such a gracious woman and quiet and loving. I'm sure that year was hard on her as it was on me, and she was just so thankful that her son made her home, but she didn't want to be at the airport. That's my story. And the official story is she had a cold. She had a cold, she could have. But anyway, my dad was there, my brothers, and their family, and it was cool. Yeah, it was cool. And that's why I sort of showed you that picture of that mobile home. It said "Welcome Home, Raj" on it. That sign was made by one of my wife's uncles, who was an artist. And he quickly made that sign on Sunday morning and taped it up on that mobile home before we got there.
All right. So now this is still coming back, and you're not done with the Army yet.
No. I had, yeah.
You get reacquainted, and then it's okay, off to Fort Polk with you. How long did you have to serve now?
Well, I came back in October. November 5 was my birthday. I was on leave at the time, and that also was election day, and Richard Nixon was re-elected. Was he
elected first time?
First time. Yeah. Okay, he was elected. I voted absentee from Vietnam. I don't know. I sent it in. I assume I voted. But anyway, that was on my birthday. But then, middle of November, I had orders. I had to show up at Fort Polk at such and such a office, which I didn't know where it was. We got down and we went down together, not knowing they didn't have married housing. But I drove on base to the guard post, and I said who I was. I don't think he wanted to see my orders. I wasn't worried about that stuff then. I said who I was, and I have to report to a certain building. I don't know where it is. He gave me directions. I went in there, and the guy says, "We don't have any married housing. You'll have to live off base in Leesville, or DeRidder, two little towns near there. And he said, if you go to Leesville, go to the Chamber of Commerce. It's upstairs, like over a shoe store or something. It's upstairs in an old building downtown Leesville. So I did some paperwork, I'm sure. He said, okay, you're going to work at this headquarters company for permanent party. Be a clerk there. Okay. I don't know if I even went there. We went into Leesville. Tell you, we went upstairs to the Chamber of Commerce. Gal sitting behind a desk and said, okay, I'm here. I got in the Army. My wife is standing next to me. I says, we're told we got to rent some place. And you had some information, some listings. She says, yep. She opened her desk drawer. So there's a stack of 3x5 cards with a sign white and another stack black. She handed me the white stack. So we walk over to a little counter and shuffle through them. And we find a few places that might be interested. Write down notes. We couldn't take the cards, but we could write down some scratch paper, some notes and addresses. And we headed out to this first place we visited. It was a trailer. That might be okay. Couldn't even get to the door. It was sitting in a big mud puddle. Didn't even get inside. Well, head back. We got another place closer in town. Hey, the guy is setting up a sign in his front door for rent. Nice brick ranch house. Wow, that's where we want to go. Turn around, pull in a driveway, talk to the guy. Oh, yeah, he says, it's a building behind the house there. Went there, screen door hanging on one hinge. He's with us. We get inside. The refrigerator door won't close. It's just one little shack of a room. Can't stay here. No, thank you. Back in the car, went to the third place, which was housing built by the military for officers during World War II. So, but they had been sold off to private party, and they're now renting, but of course they're renting primarily to GIs. And that's okay. Lots of buildings. We found an apartment building available or rent, an end unit of a 4-apartment building, old, furnished. We rented it. So that's where we lived for until May, because I had to go from November now, it is middle of November to middle of May. What is that, 6 or 7 months, whatever.
Okay. And what was the actual job you were doing?
Okay. In my journal I write too, I don't really remember. I know that I can still see this orderly room. First sergeant had his desk right behind the little fence by the door where guys would come in and complain about this and that. I don't know what was in this corner, but over here was the company clerk. There's a guy from Pennsylvania who had sergeant stripes on, but he was an E4. But just because he was a company clerk and these guys were supposed to listen to him, they made him sergeant stripes, but he wasn't a sergeant. He sat here, I sat here, and there was a private office, and that was for the company clerk, or company commander. I don't even remember him. He must have been there, but I didn't pay attention to him. And I can remember only a couple things. The company clerk did most of the work. I don't know what he did. The first sergeant, one thing I did is if there was a military funeral of somebody killed in Vietnam that from eastern Texas or Louisiana and had requested a military funeral, Fort Polk would provide the honor guard, and that was always done then by an E6 in charge and then permanent party. And it was my job to assign these guys on a rotating basis to do a funeral detail, as we called it. That's why I did that. I just assign them, let them know, hey, you got such and such a day, you got to go to Biloxi, Mississippi. Well, not Mississippi, maybe. Yeah, because they went quite a ways sometimes. That was my job. And one time, they were on their way back, and again, I made no care whether black or white, guys, they were GIs. That's the way that we wanted to treat each other. They're coming back on the bus. They were going to have to stay overnight. And the NCO in charge walked in along with these other guys. They're all NCOs, or maybe E4 at the least, most of E5s and plus the E6. The E6 says, okay, we need some rooms. The clerk in the motel says, well, you guys can stay, but he can't. Oh no, we're back on the bus. So they didn't stay. Well, good for that NCO that said, no, we're all stay or none of us stay. Too bad for you, no more money. So they just came back. But you know, most of the guys there were serving out their required time, and they ran these ranges on Tiger Ridge, training more guys. We didn't have the best attitude. We had a lot of trouble on Monday morning. 2 guys got arrested for drunk and disorderly in town, you know, and you try and get them out of jail. And troubles like that, or fights. These guys are not adjusting well, and they're getting in fights. I didn't show up for reveille because I figured I worked in the order room. I'm going to get there. I can take care of the paper. You know, I'm here. Just not a good attitude. The other thing I remember, we must have had a change in command at some level, and the sergeant major came in, talked to the first sergeant, and says, I need some guy to carry the flag bearer during this ceremony. First sergeant says, I don't remember his name. He was at E7, said to me, Faber, you're the guy. Oh, brother. I don't know. And so the sergeant major gets me out there by his office, showing me when I got to hold the flag down and when I got to tip it up and what clothes I have to wear and make sure your shoes are shined and all this stuff. I remember doing that. Yeah. I played a lot of pool. We had a pool room in the back part of the orderly room, through some doors, and a day room type of thing. I played a lot of pool. And it got to the point when these guys were getting close to getting discharged, they had to come in and do some paperwork. And so the first sergeant is busy telling them they ought to re-enlist. You know, you tell to sign up. You know, you're E5. If you sign up, there's a $10,000 bonus, and they'll give you another stripe. You'll be E6 instantly. He's telling them that, and I'm shaking my head, no, don't do it. And most of them did, most of them were. But he noticed what I was doing, and so one afternoon he said, Faber, you come in the morning. I guess I was supposed to be here at 7:30, and I was. I'm a morning person. I was there on time. He says, you come in the morning, do your work, and you get out of here. I don't want to see you around. I don't care where you go, you get out of here. So often I was home by 10 o'clock in the morning. One day, this is interesting too. I like to golf now, but then I didn't golf much, but there was a golf course on Fort Polk. And I don't remember what, it couldn't have cost more than $1 or $2 to play golf, and rent some clubs, drag them around, and I'm playing all by myself, and all of a sudden there's some guy just hitting the ball a ton. So I walk off to the side of the fairway and say, come on, let's go through. You know, you're doing so good. And he catches up with me. He says, no, we can play together. He's really good. I'm really bad. But hey, I don't care if I had civilian clothes I took with me. I'm not in a uniform. I took some regular civilian clothes, changed, and then I go play golf. Couple of holes we played together, and out comes the guy from the clubhouse on a golf cart. And he says to this guy I'm golfing with, the old man is ready for his lesson. This guy puts his clubs on the golf cart, gets on the golf cart with him, and takes off. So I finish playing golf. I get back to the clubhouse, turn these rented clubs in. I say, okay, who was that guy that was golfing and you came out and picked him up? He says, that's Tom Weiskopf. Oh, he's a professional golfer. Oh, no wonder he's so good. Yeah, quite a coincidence, you know. So Sunday, a month or two later, he was in basic training, in National Guard basic training, which they also had basic training at Fort Polk, but I was always part of Tiger Ridge. He was there for basic training. Probably February or so, or March, I don't know, I'm watching television on Sunday afternoon, golf. There's Tom Weisskopf. They're talking about Tom Weisskopf playing golf. I'll be darned, I know that guy. It's interesting how funny things happen. And I would time my trip. I would never want leaving the base, going back home, when I first got there and had to work a whole day. I'd time my trip so I wasn't driving past the main post flag at retreat, because then you had to stop, stand outside your car and salute. I didn't want to do that. I would go early or late, but I didn't want to do that.
Okay. Now, while you were there, did your wife get a job, or?
No, she couldn't. There were all kinds of Army wives there, you know. And then she became pregnant, so then he wasn't feeling so good. But I don't think she tried. I don't think that the city folks liked us a whole lot. They wanted us there, but they didn't like us. Granted, a lot of GIs were troublemakers. They just caused a problem for that little town. They don't know that job was, even this town is so small, my wife needed a pair of shoes. We had to drive to Alexandria. It was a 50-mile trip to buy a pair of shoes. They didn't have her size shoes in town, or at least that she wanted to buy. It was crazy. Same thing when we were in, right after we got married, she had been working in a bank, in what was Michigan National Bank way back then, before we got married. We moved to Madison, couldn't get a job because I was draft eligible. Anybody wanted, they knew what was going to happen, more than likely. And there was enough people that, now, and when we got out, she didn't go back to work. When I got out of Fort Polk, got out of there on a Friday. I was supposed to get out on Sunday, but they didn't process Saturday and Sunday, so I got out on Friday before. Walked out of that building with my pay and our travel pay from Fort Polk up to Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I'm getting plenty of cash, and we're moving home. That was on Friday. We hit Grand Rapids. Sunday afternoon was Mother's Day. I had forgotten that, but when I worked through my journal and then wrote down the things for my grandkids and kids, my wife says, that was Mother's Day when we got home. Then she didn't go back to work. I had been working in Madison, and I had every intention of going back, and they were obligated to give me a job back. And I wrote to the guy that I really connected with there, and he still worked there, Palmer Hayes, and asked him for some drawings, because I said, Palmer, I think I would like to, in a letter, I'd like to see if I can get a job in Grand Rapids. I've been away for 2 years. My family is all there, my wife's family. See if I can get a job. I don't know, so don't say too much. So he fixed me up with a set of drawings that I had done some of the drawings on. Get home, and my brother-in-law says, you know, there's this one small firm, nice guy owns it, his name is Dave Post. Why don't you talk to him? So I called him up. He says, yeah, come in and see me. We'll go to lunch someday. So I went down. We went to lunch. He was a member of the Pen Club. We had a nice lunch. On the way back, he says, you got a job. So that was it. Worked, and my wife didn't go back to work until our kids were in middle school and high school, and then she went back to work.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of my story.
All right. So to look back in the time you spent in the service, how do you think that affected you, or what did you take out of it?
Oh, man, it affected me dramatically, especially my time in Vietnam, because we knew no flesh toilets. I didn't, to this day, Jim, we got a very nice house. I became registered afterwards, so I'm a registered architect, and I had a good career. We have a nice house in Forest Hills. There's a downspout outside our bedroom wall at the corner of the house. If it's raining, I can hear water dripping down that downspout. And I thank God for a clean, dry, warm place to sleep. It's changed me. My baseline of what I need has really dropped, because my wife will say, you know, we really ought to replace some carpet. And she didn't want to hear me say. I said, I think it's like brand new. But it's okay for me. But we've been married for 51 years. If she says we got to replace the carpet, we replace the carpet. But not because I've ever noticed. It's just, so that has changed me. And it's a good thing. I don't feel bad about that. Now I volunteer every Friday with Family Promise, a homeless shelter for families. I do that for a couple of reasons. I used to tutor and mentor young men, African American, black boys. Now I volunteer with Family Promise, again, because I've been blessed so much in my lifetime, and the military service has been part of that. It's had the impact on me that I have real empathy for homeless families. Mm-hmm. Family Promise is unique because they keep the dads and the older boys with their mother and the little kids. They have 27 families in the program. The families at this point spend only a month to 2 months. By that time, Family Promise has helped them develop their resume, coached them on interviewing, found them a job, and found them affordable housing. Then they're offered a mentor or a coach, whatever they want to call it, to work with them for the next year or whatever. They'll meet with you once a month, once a week, twice a month, once a month, help them make better decisions. These aren't bad people. Some of them, I wonder about, but most of them are not bad people. Mm-hmm. But they made bad decisions primarily because they didn't have the benefit of a family unit that didn't even tell them how to make decisions. They did. My parents showed us how. So I kind of caught it. I wasn't taught it, but I was caught it. I saw my parents sacrifice so we could go to Christian school. That was more important than having a different car or having a television. So I attribute some of that to my parents, the upbringing I had, and my faith, which is still most important to me, and in my family. And I want to leave some legacy to my children and grandchildren of what I think is important. So at Christmas time, I give all the grandkids $20 and tell them, I would like you to contribute this to some organization. Any organization you choose, just send me an email on where it went. So I know you did something good with it. And I hope that they'll remember Grandpa Faber by that. Now 3 of them are in college. One of them is transferring to Grand Valley. She wants to be a ultrasonographer or whatever they call it. She went 2 years to Lee University and now she's going up to Grand Valley. She's the oldest. Then I got a grandson, or we do have a grandson who goes to Grove City College in Grove City, Pennsylvania. He's on a full ride scholarship. Very bright. And another grandson goes to Judson University in Elgin, Illinois. They have an excellent architecture school, and that's where he's going. And he's doing better than he did in high school, which is the same thing for me. I just wasn't motivated and applied myself enough in high school. I did much better in college. All of that's okay, but I'm hoping that they sense, Grandpa, there's some more important things to Grandpa than, I want them to get an education, but I want them to use it. They have some God-gifted talent, and I want them to develop it. I have another grandson who's be a senior in high school in Chicago Christian next year. My daughter and her husband live there. She's a teacher in Christian middle school, but Alex will graduate. He said always for years he wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. That's fine, Alex. We saw him this fall, and I said, are they still taping all this? because this has nothing to do with Vietnam. This is just me now talking.
This is just if we're moving toward closing out. It's fine.
It's,
But yes,
anyway, saw Alex last fall, grandparents' day at Chicago Christian High School. We're eating lunch at this table. His other grandparents are sitting across. Alex is there, Alex's friend, Judy and I. And I said to Alex, I go to the Air Force Academy, and I had witnessed him in an honors calculus class. That kid is bright. He's doing it on his iPad or on his laptop and his phone, these problems of teachers. And he's scoring in the top 3 in his class doing the problem twice. Anyway, bright kid. I said, are you going to major in engineering? He says, Grandpa, he says, I think I'm being called to be a teacher and teach religion class in high schools. Good, Alex. It almost makes me cry that, you know, I think they're learning more than an education. Education is important. I'm not minimizing it. It's very important. But to me, there's some character that's more important, just as important. You can be a person of high character delivering coal. I saw that. And it's good work. And he could have done more, but he did the best he could. My mother couldn't finish school either. She could have been a librarian, very, very bright, but didn't have the opportunity. They were born in 1908, 1906, lived through the Depression. Anyway, that's getting way off field,
All
but I got to say about any reflections on this. I mentioned, I think briefly, that I think Vietnam was a mistake in that we never understood what the Vietnamese wanted. They wanted to have all of us occupiers out of here. We didn't get it. After watching the documentaries, I had read a book several years ago about Vietnam, the history or something. I think it was produced PBS or NPR or something. It was a very thick book. I lent to my daughter. But in there, it was the first time I heard that maybe the Gulf of Tonkin was based not on a fact. And that troubled me. Then Robert McNamara, on his deathbed, fessed up. LBJ never did. Robert McNamara said it was. It was not the truth, which gave a basis for the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which gave the president the authority to build this thing up. And then I watch a documentary and I hear these politicians say, I know we can't. Literally, I know we're not going to win, but I got to get reelected. And my blood boils to think, how can you do that? How can you sleep at night? Now we have a memorial, 58,000 names of young people, primarily young people. What do you want to say to their parents, want to say to their siblings or to their spouse? How would you do that? So now I've become not skeptical anymore. I'm cynical, and I don't like that. And I'm trying not to be angry about it. But when I think about it,
Sure.
I am angry that I expect better from our leaders. I really do.
Yeah. I think that's a perfectly reasonable expectation. I'll tell you, it makes for a very good story, and you tell it well. So I'd just like to close this by thanking you for taking the time to share it today.
Well, my pleasure. I did recall from that initial interview, which I wasn't prepared for, but when I watched the videos that I did and went through that process, and then I got your mailing, I thought, I'll share this. He can do what he wants. Maybe it's nothing, but I put a lot of work in. It took me a long time, a lot of thought, a lot of remembering. So now my interview can be better too, because I recalled, and I got a different perspective on things.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
All right.
Okay.